Throughout most of the pandemic, the federal government has been able to prevent many evictions for people who are behind on their rent. That's due in large part to a moratorium or ban imposed by the Centers for Disease Control and tied to public health concerns. But the Supreme Court has said that the moratorium must expire unless Congress passes new legislation.
There's been so many closures of musical clubs and facilities that presented live music. Many musicians cannot work. There's no place to work, and because they can't work, they have not been able to pay their rent, sometimes 4, 5, 6 months at a time. I understand there's been a mass exodus of people leaving their apartments and condos in New York City.
Some people are leaving, and it may be temporary.
Welcome to Odds and Ends. Unfortunately, my co-host and great partner, Andrew J. Kozlowski, I actually think he's on the planet Jupiter right now, so he won't be here tonight. But I want you to know he's safe and he's taking care of business, and he'll be back next week. But tonight we have rock and roll real estate with lawyer David Kaminsky, who also is a very adept keyboardist who plays rock and roll. So stay put and tune in. We've got a great show for you tonight. You can learn about some of the happenings and some of the legal boundaries of what's happening with real estate right now in New York. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Odds and Ends. I'm really proud to present to you David Kaminsky, who is one of New York City's top real estate lawyers. He's going to answer questions about the evictions in New York City, rent, etc., and what we can do as people or performers, if anything, to protect ourselves if we are presented with eviction notices, etc. So without further ado, let's bring on David Kaminsky. How you doing, Dave, man?
I'm great, Clyde. Thank you, and it's always great to see you.
Yeah, and thank you for coming on. I've been trying to make this happen for a long time. Can you tell us, I know your company is David Kaminsky and Associates. What's your address, actually?
My office is located at 325 Broadway, which is downtown Manhattan in Tribeca, very near to the courts. We're just a block and a half away from Supreme Court, Civil Court, Family Court, Federal Court. So we're right down here with all the court systems, the judges, the court personnel, and we like to be down here because we're in court a lot.
Oh, that makes it easy for you to get back and forth to the court. Yeah, cool. So I guess one of the questions that I would like to ask, and I know many people are wondering, with the pandemic, there's been so many closures of musical clubs and facilities that presented live music. Many musicians cannot work. There's no place to work, and because they can't work, they have not been able to pay their rent, sometimes 4, 5, 6 months at a time.
Nakiah Hodges appeared in court this morning to fight eviction over an alleged lease violation.
My house situation is not good. Like, me and my son have been washing up with cold water for over a month now.
She says her landlord shut off her utilities and wants her out. The single mother lost her job during the pandemic and is among the estimated 6.9 million households behind on rent. She hopes the CDC's new moratorium on evictions, which extends until October 3rd, helps keep her in her home.
Is there any legal advice you could give to people who are against the wall, they don't have any steady work, and they've been served with an eviction notice? What are their options?
Well, the first thing I would tell them is don't move out because they received a notice. They should talk to somebody who has knowledge and information about what processes are happening right now with evictions. Evictions have been stayed by the administration and the government through the end of June 2021. And although I can't guarantee this, my expectation is that they will be paused even further than that date. And the government is in the process of trying to come up with some plans and programs that will help people like that. So they should research the opportunities that could be available to them to get assistance before they just leave their apartment or their home, because I think there will be a lot of plans and programs to help people in that predicament.
So you're saying if you leave your apartment, then you're actually shut out for certain.
Well, once you're gone, if you leave voluntarily because you received some kind of a notice, the landlord is going to have a very good position to say you voluntarily left and you abandoned the apartment, and they will likely rent it to someone else. So yes, that's why you should not leave.
Another question has been asked. There was a concept allegedly of warehousing stores. If you go up and down Broadway, you can see a litany of businesses and restaurants. They have signs out saying that they're closed permanently and for rent, but yet there's a concept called warehousing where they do not rent to anyone because allegedly the owners of the property say they profit more by warehousing it, meaning not renting it to anyone. How does that work? How does that make monetary sense that they can make money by not renting it instead of renting it to someone who has cash in hand?
Well, I don't think it's exactly the way you expressed it. I don't think they make more money by just keeping it vacant, but there could be reasons or strategic reasons or legal reasons why they don't rent it to whoever comes around trying to rent it. One issue is that many of these properties have mortgages. They owe money to lenders, and the lenders may have restrictions and requirements that the lender has to approve any commercial lease in the property. So it's very possible that the lender doesn't want them to rent to a tenant who is not paying a certain level of rent or doesn't have a certain level of financial ability. Another possibility is that the landlords are waiting and they would rather wait a month or 2 months or even a year or sometimes even more than a year to get a very strong commercial tenant who will pay a higher rent and have an ability to stay in business longer than just to rent to perhaps a smaller startup type of business that doesn't have a proven track record. So there's more than one issue. It does appear that there is warehousing going on. Some concepts are out there that it is a bad behavior by landlords, and I would say it's more often practical behavior rather than evil behavior by landlords when you see an empty store.
Right. There's logic. There's a reason behind it.
Yes, of course. A landlord is much better off having a store that is occupied. It's better for the building to have people there, people watching, people present. And of course, it's better to have money coming in, to have an income.
Yeah. Now, another thing, I understand there's been a mass exodus of people leaving their apartments and condos in New York City, not because they can't afford them, is that they have money, but they've decided to leave New York, I guess, to be safer or far away from being congested and catching COVID possibly.
Yeah, so that's an issue that we've seen, and some people are leaving, and it may be temporary, and some people are coming back. Some people are upgrading. They're just finding this a time where they see an opportunity for a change that makes sense for them. What I've seen is younger couples that have children, wanting to have a backyard, a place to park a car, and the suburbs have become more appealing to people like that, whereas I would say 10 years ago there was a move away from the suburbs back to the city. Now it seems like the suburbs have a renewed appeal for some people.
Right.
And some people have enough money to have a home in the suburbs and to keep their apartment in the city. And the idea of a second home has become more attractive. And I mean a stable second home,
Right.
whether it's in the Catskills or the Berkshires or wherever. And younger people, some time ago, not that long ago, wouldn't want to be tied down to a second home and have the burdens and responsibilities of a second home. And they like to travel, but they wouldn't want to go to the same place every summer or every vacation. But now the idea of a stable second place where they could go and have a backyard and all this kind of comfort of space and isolation, even that they're not that close to the neighbor. These are things that have become more appealing. At the same time, people who were on the sidelines waiting for their chance to have a dream apartment in the neighborhood that they really always wanted to be in, or maybe an apartment that had a terrace or an extra bedroom, are finding this to be a great time to accomplish that dream. And I'm seeing a lot of that also.
Is that because landlords are kind of forced to lower the rents because of the economic disparity and paucity? Landlords cannot charge the same rents they once charged a year ago.
That's right. They can't charge the same rent, so the rents have come down. They haven't come down drastically, but they've come down enough that some people can upgrade the way they want. And also, not just rents, but sales prices of co-ops and condos have become a little bit more competitive. And sometimes it doesn't take a big difference, but just enough difference to fit into someone's budget, and they will want to upgrade to something that is better for them. I mean, we're in our apartments more, it seems, than we used to be. So a dining room, yeah. So a nicer kitchen is a big deal right now, or
Yes.
a dining room if you didn't have it before, or even a terrace just to go out now and then on your terrace and get some air. Maybe have a plant out there or whatever it is, a chair, and enjoy your terrace a little bit. These little things make a big difference when you're spending so much time in your apartment.
Good point. Now, when the pandemic is over and allegedly jobs are restored, will landlords then be able to raise the rent to what it used to be a year ago? Can they do that legally? Or are there only little increments they can move?
Well, if the apartment is deregulated, meaning it's not rent controlled or rent stabilized, the landlord can increase the rent, but there are special notices that the landlord has to give. And there was a big overhaul in the rent laws in 2019 called the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act. So a landlord has to give a certain period of time notice if he wants to increase the rent more than 5%. So that's even with deregulated units. So there are some protections even for deregulated tenants that they have to get ample notice of any bump ups in the rent.
Mm-hmm. Now, studio apartments in Manhattan proper, for a studio, I heard that some people are paying rent sometimes $1,900 to $2,000 for a studio. That's literally having hardly any room to save anything or to build furniture or anything. Is that the going rent, you would say, today for a studio in Manhattan?
I would say so, and that actually those rents that you mentioned, $1,900, $2,000, are pretty reasonable rents for studios in the city, and people are who used to be in studios are upgrading to one bedrooms. I would say studios are probably the least desirable apartment right now in the city, for sale or for rent.
Right.
And people, like I said, people who want to sell a studio or rent a studio are having to price them very competitively.
Yeah, I would say that's true because moving into a studio doesn't give you much leeway, much room at all, So, yeah, I never thought of it as being the least desirable, but you're probably true. What do you think about, I know you and I love Broadway. I loved going to Broadway. I had a ticket agent. I could get tickets for anything. It may be $400, $500, or $600. I don't care. Now Broadway is not happening at all. Do you have any projections as to when you think Broadway is going to reopen or how it might happen?
I love Broadway too, and when I would go to a Broadway show, the one part that I wouldn't love would always be the very tight seating in the antique theaters.
Right.
Most of them are pretty old and not built for big people. That's a really sad thing for me, that theaters are going to have a hard time opening. I think they will have to open at a very diminished capacity, maybe
Right.
50%.
Well, I was also thinking that the theaters proper on Broadway, they have to still, I believe that most of them are still paying rent, right? Some of them.
The ones that have that are not owned by the theater companies, I'm sure they have worked out something with the property owners to pay something, or to pay even nothing while they're out of functionality. And a lot of that same kind of thing is happening with a lot of different businesses around the city.
Right. Beautiful. Now, myself, I'm a musician, so I have like 20 different bases. And I know you were telling me, hey, I own property in the Hamptons, Central Park West, Long Island, Manhattan. You too, you just collect homes and properties. You just buy them because you enjoy them and you keep them for a while. And if you like them, you hold on. If not, then you get rid of them. Am I correct?
Well, I have some income producing properties. I do like to buy properties as investments. But I don't really just collect them for my own personal use.
I see that there's a method to the madness.
I either live in them, and I do live in my apartment on Broadway in the Upper West Side, and whatever other properties I have, I do love them, but I rent them for income purposes.
Beautiful. Now, I know a long time ago, I had showed you this book. It's about Vanishing New York, How a Great City Lost Its Soul by Jeremiah Moss. And it basically was addressing how so many city blocks now are adorned with Dwayne Reeds and CVS's and Starbucks. And they were explaining in the book how when a Starbucks is placed into a neighborhood, they've already done market research to understand that the neighborhood and the people in that neighborhood can afford $4.50 for coffee or $7 for a cup of coffee. But some people are alleging that by having so many of these Dwayne Reeds and CVS's, Starbucks, that is kind of destroying the antiquity of the city. Some of the, special nuances of the neighborhoods. What do you say about that? Is it just about making money? They don't care about that. It's about making money, right?
Well, I think a landlord is happy to have a Starbucks because it's a stable tenant, and the landlord believes that they'll pay the rent and maybe a higher rent than like your typical neighborhood bodega or diner. And the same idea for a Dwayne Reed or Walgreens. And of course, I don't love those things. I remember the city before those things were here in the city, and the city had in our view, more character. But I think for the young people, they're used to these things, and they don't hurt the character of the city. They find character and style and quality in perhaps other things and other ways. So I don't want to be too negative about Starbucks. I know a lot of people,
Because you like the coffee too, don't you?
well, not really. I can't even remember the last time I bought a coffee at Starbucks. I like to make my own coffee. It makes much better sense to me, and it tastes better, and I save like $4 or $5 every time. But I know people do like it, and a lot of young people love Starbucks. So I don't want to tell them that they shouldn't love it if they love it. Makes them happy. Nothing bad is happening there at Starbucks or Walgreens. So it's just a different kind of convenience that younger people seem to want or need.
Right.
And it's okay. I think as long as people are happy and being creative and doing good things, the city still has a soul.
True.
We hope you learned a few new things listening to real estate lawyer David Kaminsky. And we do hope that you tune in next week for part 2 of David Kaminsky, Rock and Roll Real Estate. So until next week, good night and stay bright.